Chair Long, the live streaming has started, so whenever you'd like to get the meeting underway, it's ready to go.
Thank you, Joyce. I think I was scrolling through. I think we maybe need one more person, if I'm counting correctly. I've got myself. I saw Councilmember Kitchen, Mayor Adler, Tucker, Mayor Houston, Councilmember Matea, Mayor Morgan, Judge Oakley, Commissioner Terrio, and Mayor Van Arsdale. Did I miss somebody?
Mr. Mitchell was just admitted to the meeting as well.
Okay, great. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's 11. We can start. Awesome. So I'll go, and I don't know. I know Travis County moved their meeting to today, so I don't know if they finished their Commissioners Court meeting yet or not. So, does anybody know if they're still meeting?
Madam Chair, I spoke to Commissioner Trevelyan about an hour ago. I expect everyone to be here.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, we'll wait one more minute or so, and then we'll get started.
And yes, that was Christmas music. It's past November 1st, so we can play Christmas music. Hi, everybody.
53 days to Christmas, if I am counting correctly.
The countdown started.
Yeah, it's past Halloween, so we got one thing down. So now you can, although you got to do something about Thanksgiving.
Hey, Home Depot's had their Christmas decorations up for weeks now. It was sort of colliding with the Halloween stuff.
No doubt. And Madam Vice Chair, the way the Cowboys are playing, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to pay attention to Thanksgiving this year. So we'll see what happens.
Hey, my Aggies are ranked number 7.
Hey, we're ranked again too, okay? So we're coming back.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 2:02 p.m. on Monday, November 2nd. We are meeting live virtually, still under the disaster declaration enacted by the governor. We have a quorum, and Joyce, or if you see anybody else pop into the meeting, will you make note of that so that we can record their attendance?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. So we do have a quorum, and I was notified by Joyce that we have no public comments today. So we will skip that part and go on. I have no announcements at this time. And I don't know if I saw anybody from the TAC on the call. Was there a TAC? I don't know that there was a TAC meeting. Was there?
There was no TAC meeting, Madam Chair.
Okay, that's what I thought. So we will skip that. Commissioner Shea, I see you. Thanks for joining us.
And I know I've been on for a little while. I am also carrying Commissioner Trevelyan's proxy, and his staff was going to communicate with Ashby about it.
He got that information. Thank you very much. All right. So nothing on item number 5. So we will move on to our action items, which is items 6 through 8. Has everybody had a chance to review the meeting minutes from our October 12th meeting? And if so, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve, Mayor Morgan.
Okay. Motion by Mayor Morgan, and I think I heard a second from Judge Oakley. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any comments or changes or? Okay. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Okay. Hearing none, we will assume that passes unanimously. Item number 7, discuss and take appropriate action on open roads policy. If you all remember several meetings ago, We had a presentation on this. And I think Tom has brought this back to us for action today. So, Tom, I know you're on the line if you want to go ahead and with our presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tom Fowler. I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates, and Kimley Horn has been working with Campo and the TxDOT Austin District to develop the regional open roads policy. As was noted, we presented to the board for information in August, and we also presented this policy to the TAC in September. So today I wanted to provide just a brief refresher of what's in the open roads policy, discuss the comments we received from the TAC, and then we had a request for approval. The regional open roads policy for traffic incident management is essentially a formalized commitment of the region to opening roads as quickly and as safely as possible after traffic incidents. We define traffic incidents as any type of crash, debris in the roadway, disabled vehicle, or other event that's going to block the travel ways. These policies have been adopted in about a dozen states across the country, but as far as we know, Campo will be the first MPO to develop and enact a policy. Although we have seen many examples of MPOs, such as the Atlanta Regional Commission, endorsing statewide policies. We've been working closely with TxDOT's Traffic Safety Division. We know Texas is looking to put a policy in place, but the Traffic Safety Division estimated we're still several years away from having a similar policy on the statewide basis, but we wanted to ensure that the policy we enact for Campo is similar to what Texas may do on a statewide basis so that they work together. And we think it was important to try to push this policy forward because it supports open roads and will help us, particularly with the major construction coming on 35, to try to keep as much capacity open on the freeway and make the freeway safer during a time when we're going to have limited capacity with construction. The open roads policy, a key part of it is to try to reduce congestion by clearing incidents quicker. And the second key part is really to enhance the safety of both first responders and the traveling public. We are looking for ways, we know whenever there's an incident, the likelihood of a first responder being struck increases as the incident continues. So the longer they're out there, the more likelihood there is of someone being injured. And the same goes for the public. The longer an incident remains, the more time is spent with people stopping unexpectedly behind a backup, the more likely there is to have a secondary crash. And often those secondary crashes are rear-end crashes that result in very likely injury and sometimes fatal crashes. So we want to try to clear it as quick as possible to not only reduce congestion, but improve safety for first responders and the public. We think the policy supports programs that Campo currently allocates funding towards, like the HERO Freeway Service Patrol, that seek to make incident scenes safer and manage traffic better. And this continues to support activities like that. It does support compliance towards meeting federal performance metric requirements. And there's really no cost with the policy. Ultimately, we do want to use the policy to support some of the programs and projects that are being recommended that will help reduce incidents, but the policy itself is really no cost. Next slide, please. The open roads policy was originally identified as a need for the region in the 2018 Campo Regional Incident Management Strategic Plan and Performance Assessment, which was approved by the Campo board in December 2018. And the open roads policy was seen as sort of the overarching framework that would help support some of the other incident management recommendations that came out of that plan. There were a total of 6 that focused on trying to do things to improve incident management where we've seen the greatest need. Things like how we deal with spill cleanup on freeways, how we deal with heavy vehicle wrecks that often take a lot of time to clean up and open the roads, putting into place something like a rapid clear towing program that would quickly move vehicles off the freeway onto arterial streets so that, if there's work that needs to be done on the vehicle, if a tow is needed, we wanted to just get vehicles off the road as quick as possible. But the open roads policy was seen as the initial supporting document that would support these other recommendations. Next slide, please. Just the quick overview of what's in the policy. Essentially, what we're saying is anytime a road or travel lane is closed or blocked, that first responders will and incident responders will try to reopen the roadway as soon as possible in an urgent manner, but safety of the public and the incident responders will still remain the highest priority. So in no way are we encouraging any type of rush behavior, but we're looking at programs like being able to dispatch the nearest tow truck that's available rather than say go with a list and maybe not get the closest tow truck. Making sure we have the right equipment and right training for towing providers, looking at ways that we can clear and investigate incidents sooner and quicker. So we don't want to in any way jeopardize the safety of first responders, but we do want to target strategies and programs that will make incident clearance happen quicker. Generally, we have a target of clearing all incidents within 90 minutes, which is consistent with what's called the National Unified Goal. That's an accepted goal among first responders across the nation to try to clear all incidents within 90 minutes. And in our plan, we did identify specifically for freeways a goal to respond to incidents and have equipment on scene within 30 minutes and clear the roadway within 60 minutes. And we realized that's a challenge for certain types of incidents, particularly fatal crashes, but that was the goal to try to strive for, using things like different investigative techniques such as drones that can allow investigations to happen quicker, or what some agencies such as the Travis County Sheriff do, where often on a fatal crash, they may take some initial photos and measurements, but then come back at a later time if the incident happens during rush hour, come back in the evening or come back on the weekends at a time when traffic is going to be lighter and they can set up a full traffic control of the scene and do their investigation. So techniques like that would even allow us to investigate and clear fatal crashes much quicker. And finally, the policy does recommend that we track and assess incident management performance as a region so we can identify which strategies are working and where we need to improve. Next slide, please. In September, we presented the open roads policy to the TAC for information. We received several comments, but I think the overall input was that they supported this and saw the benefit of having a policy and recommended it go back to the board. Just a couple of notes from comments we received. They asked about should this include pedestrian and non-motorized vehicle related traffic incidents? And the policy itself really applies to any type of incident, whether it's a crash, it's debris, it's anything that's blocking the roadway. But we did add some language just to specify that we're looking at motorized and non-motorized vehicle type crashes, along with these other types of incidents that may block lanes. They asked if we should state the functional class of roadways to which it applies, which we did add some language working with Campo staff to specify the policy does apply to minor arterials and above. There was some discussion about the need to look at traffic signal timing on frontage roads in response to major freeway traffic incidents. And we agreed that that is a key strategy to manage traffic, being able to adjust arterial signal timing in response to a freeway closure. And we did note in the language that that is a strategy we encourage if it's available. We realize different cities are at different levels of technical capabilities, so not all cities are able to do that. And we didn't want this policy to create a burden for cities, but we did want to encourage the use of that centralized traffic signal control in response to incidents. And finally, it was asked if there's enforceable language in the policy for collection of performance measures. And while the policy supports performance measure collection, again, we didn't want to put that burden because not all cities or all law enforcement agencies are currently collecting performance measures. There is work to try to incorporate some of the key performance measures we want to look at, like the time it takes to respond to an incident, the time to clear the road, and the time to clear the entire incident scene. Putting that in the Texas statewide crash information system, CRIS. So ultimately, we think that that information will be available, but we didn't want to make that a requirement for cities at the current time. Next slide. And that summarizes just the initial information that we received from the TAC. We believe we've addressed the comments and things that they were requested in the policy, and then wanted to bring this back for approval today. And Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Tom, thank you for that recap. And, I think it's a great opportunity at little or no cost to make some significant improvements. And as somebody who, Commissioner Beckett, don't take it. I've got the joy of sitting on 71 through Bastrop on Sunday because of an incident that took a very long time to clear. So, does anybody have any questions for Tom?
Chair Long, this is Tucker. Not a question necessarily, but a comment, if I might.
Please do.
I'd just like to comment. I think this is a great step in the right direction, and in setting some goals for ourselves for the Clear Roads policy. I have to say one of the programs that we get almost across the board positive remarks on is the HERO program, and it's from individual motorists who send in cards and send in emails and write letters of commendation for our HERO program that's out there, but not only for the people that are helped, but I also get many calls and thanks from our first responders, whether it's sheriff's office, police departments, EMS, even fire departments, because many times when they're the first responders on a scene and are responding to a crash and trying to get it cleared up, once our HERO program arrives, that relieves them of any traffic control burden. So they work hand in hand together, and I think this is a really good opportunity for this policy board to acknowledge the efforts and the program and set these goals out for everybody, because all of those EMS and the fire departments and the police departments and HERO in our case work for the members of this policy board. So I think it's a really good step in the right direction. Thank you.
So Tucker, that sounds like a motion to me.
I will make the motion. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And I'll second that. Is there any other discussion?
Madam Chair.
Let's see. Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I think this is a great policy. I can tell you, my constituents at Steiner Ranch were absolutely furious beyond words. We all got all capped emails from them when the accident on 620, which was a horrible accident, the driver of a fire truck lost consciousness and had a medical emergency and crossed the oncoming lanes of traffic, knocked out the traffic light, and I think loosened electrical wires. Anyway, the whole intersection at 620 in near Comanche Trail was shut down, I think, for 8 hours. And so everyone wanted to know who made the decision to stop traffic for all that time. So I completely support this whole initiative to clear the roads more quickly. But I just had a technical question, I guess. Who is the ILA with?
Tom, do you want to address that question?
Well, I think it was something that the board, we were asking for approval and to have, I don't know the technicalities of how that is actually approved, but I think the idea was it was just the individual member agencies signing on that they agreed with the policy and would support the continued efforts to keep the roads open.
And like I said, I'm supportive of this, but it's really the sheriff's department. So have there been discussions with the Travis County Sheriff or the department?
Yes, and in the development of this policy, we worked very closely with, of course, TxDOT, with CapCog, which does a lot of the training of some of the more rural first responder agencies, as well as police, sheriff, fire. And then there's a group called Aim High, which is a regional incident management group made up, it's led by TxDOT, but made up of many of the first responders in the area. And they meet on a typically an every other month basis to review major incidents in the region and talk about what to do.
Mine's really a jurisdiction. I can't take an action that binds my sheriff. She's an independently elected official. So I'm supportive of this, but and we had our county attorney look at it. They don't think it's necessarily binding because the parties aren't spelled out. So I'm fine to approve it. It just would be helpful if there was more specific detail around these kinds of agreements if they involve specific parties. But I'm great for it.
Thank you, Commissioner Shea. And, that was one of the things that we talked about as well is, how do you put teeth to it? But we, certainly with sheriff and police chiefs, et cetera, would be the boots on the ground dealing with that. But each one of our bodies could certainly show support by moving forward with that. I think Councilmember Kitchen, you had a question?
Yeah, it's really, I support this too. I think it's great and we need to move it forward. It's just, I've never, an ILA, or at least in my experience, is a contract that two parties sign. And so I thought it was just perhaps should be styled as a policy, because that was really my question. If there was a intent that we go back to our bodies, because it's not really an agreement between two entities. So
Yeah, I think going forward, we, some bodies pass resolutions of support. It's going to depend on the city or the county as to how they do that, and we can clean that part up. But
Okay.
Overall, great program.
That's great. It's just it's not binding the city this way at all. It's not an ILA, but that's okay. We can. I think we certainly support it.
Right.
Councilmember Kitchen, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Ashby.
So Councilmember
Yes.
Kitchen and
Yes.
Commissioner Shea, to your point, Tom and I had discussed actually this very item last week, and we were trying to figure out what was the correct wording for it. And we're good with changing interlocal to policy. I think that will probably solve the issue.
Well, it might just be more straightforward if there's no objection to that.
I think that sounds good. I mean,
Okay, are there any other comments or questions on this?
Commissioner,
Yes.
I'd like to add a little bit to what Tucker was saying earlier. My police chiefs and my fire chiefs can't say enough about the HERO program along 35. So most of the times they get to the accidents before they do. And it just frees them up to have vehicles that would normally have to be protection that HERO vehicle takes over for. So it's a big savings to them, and it's a great program. And like I said, my first responders can't thank us enough for having that program.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just as I appreciate Tucker highlighting it, but a shout out, hearkening back to some earlier days on Campo. This was something that was actually championed by Senator Watson when he was chair of Campo, and myself as vice chair back in the day, and Chief Art Acevedo. So there's some blasts from the past. Any other? And if you all don't mind muting your microphone when you're not speaking, that would be great. Are there any other questions or comments? Mayor Houston.
Thank you, Chair Long. I had the same questions because I was looking on the signature page for who else was signing it. It's a great idea. And do we have a motion for this yet?
Yes. Tucker made the motion and I seconded it.
Okay, then I will make a motion to amend that we replace the words interlocal agreement with the word policy. And it occurs several times throughout the document.
How about if we just do that as a friendly amendment to the original motion? Tucker, is that a friendly amendment for you?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay, and that's friendly to the second. So that way we don't have to vote on an amendment and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I don't do those when I'm doing a meeting. If we're going to change a document that's been presented to us in the public, we actually have a motion to amend. But as long as it gets changed, I guess that's fine.
We'll get her done. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Is there anybody opposed to the motion with changing the words ILA to policy? Okay, hearing no opposition, motion passes unanimously. And before we go on to item number 8, before he gets off the phone, I think Mayor Ross has to leave the meeting. But this, unless his mayor's race ends up in a runoff, this is going to be his last meeting. So I want to thank Mayor Ross for your service to not only the city of Georgetown, but also to this Transportation Policy Board. We appreciate it, Mayor. He may already be gone. All right. Okay, so we will move on to item number 8, which is discuss and take appropriate action on TDC application for the city of Kyle. And Ryan, I think you have this one. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Long. So this item is requesting the policy board approve a transportation development credit application for the city of Kyle's siding relocation project. As you can see here on the map, this is actually the new location of the siding. This is a project that the policy board awarded back in 2018. They were awarded close to $15 million. And this is to relocate the double tracking siding that is currently located centrally through downtown Kyle, where it crosses RM 150. And this siding actually, when trains stop on it, actually causes significant congestion issues, as well as safety issues with pedestrians, as well as hindering first responders. So we evaluated that back in 2018, and the policy board awarded the $15 million for the project. And so the sponsor has requested 3.8 million transportation development credits, and this would be in lieu of the local match. So Campo currently has close to 800 million transportation development credits. And with the approval of this application, we would have a balance of 786 million transportation development credits. And so part of the what transportation development credits do is that it allows the sponsor to just be reimbursed at a 100% reimbursement rate on their federal funding. And so the local match actually has to be moved to a different transportation project, and this is called the maintenance of effort. Part of the transportation development credit policy outlined by the federal government is that if you award TDCs to a project, you pick those the local dollars that were actually allocated to that project from the sponsor, and then spend it on a similar transportation investment. So essentially, that maintains the same level of investment in the transportation system in the region. And so as you can see in the backup materials, Hays County has actually identified RM 3237 as their maintenance of effort project. So if y'all do award the TDCs to the Kyle Sidings project, what Hays County and the city of Kyle will do is they're going to use that local match and use it to make safety upgrades and improvements along 5 intersections along the RM 3237 corridor between Wimberley and Kyle, it looks like. So if you have any questions about it, we have reviewed both projects. Both projects actually have to meet all of the policy goals and objectives outlined in the credit policy, as well as the eligibility criteria as well. And that requirement goes for both projects. And so we have reviewed the application and everything checks out. And so we are requesting that the policy board approves this application. And with approval, we will make the necessary changes and amend the transportation improvement program to reflect these changes. But that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions about the application or the TDC policy, I'll be more than happy to take those now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioner Jones, do I hear a motion from you?
You sure do.
Is there a second?
Second, Mayor Morgan.
All right, Mayor Morgan seconds that. So does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Chair Long?
Yes, is that Commissioner Shea?
Yeah, this Commissioner, I'm very supportive of this, but this kind of feels like Groundhog Day. I do not recall, and maybe it's just because I'm not remembering it, but I thought there was going to be a proposal for a more fleshed out TDC policy brought back to the board. Has that happened yet? If not, I'm happy to vote for this with the understanding that the Campo staff will bring back a review and recommendations for a more detailed TDC policy before we grant more.
So Ashby, I think we have a policy. Is there something more detailed you're looking for, Commissioner Shea?
Well, I think we were going to look at perhaps priorities for how to use TDCs in order to figure out the best way to use them. The number I heard today is the first update I recalled on the total universe of TDCs, and was it 700 million, something like that?
It's yes.
And then if there are any other criteria for the secondary projects, it can just be applied to anything, or money you've already spent, or I thought we had talked about wanting more detail around that, but I'm in support of using it for this. I just believe we still need a little bit more shape to our TDC policy, and I had thought staff was going to come back with that.
I tell you what, Commissioner, if you want to take a look at the current policy and if there's issues that you want to bring forward, that would be great. We can certainly look at those.
I'll include the language that I just went through and send it to you. And else I should include? Anybody else interested?
That'd be great. Thanks. Okay, there is a motion by
Chair
Jones and a second by Mayor Morgan.
Chair, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Councilmember Kitchen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble with my mute and unmute. Anyway, so yes, I Commissioner Shea, I'd be interested in that too. I think that it would just be good to understand that it's an asset that I'd like to think about from a strategic perspective, how we can use it to help us all as a body. And because there's a fair amount of credits sitting there. So I think it'd be helpful if we had some understanding. So Commissioner Shea, I'll be happy to work with you and kind of looking at it, and then share along, we could bring you something more specific.
Yeah, but start with the existing policy, because we do have.
Sure. That's what I meant. I think, but you know, but I'm also thinking it may not just be a policy question. It may also be how can we be proactive with the use of them to help us accomplish the goals that the body has. So.
Yeah, that was the first item. How to best DCs for the region.
And Commissioner Shea and Councilmember Kitchen, we'll send y'all the federal rules and the state rules on that, so you'll have that to help inform what you send us.
All right, thank you. Hearing no further discussion, is there anybody against the motion for item number 8? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, thank you all. And so we'll move on to item number 9. And this is, as I reviewed the bylaws, what I realized is there are some things in there that are sort of antiquated language and some cleanup that needs to be done. We haven't updated these for about 4 years. And so the vast majority of what you were sent or what was included in the backup is mostly just cleanup. I think there's probably 2 items in here that will involve some discussion. But if y'all will indulge me for a minute, I will just walk through. I'm going to skip the ones that I think are going to garner more conversation, but I'll just walk through. And this, forgive me, this was a very high level, meant for discussion only. There was not a red line version of the bylaws sent out because I wanted to really have a discussion about this. The executive committee went over this and had some discussion about these ideas on October 23rd. And there's a few edits that were made, and one that I forgot to include in this that I'll go over when I get to it. But I'll run through the whole thing. I'm going to skip 2 areas to come back to. But the first was, I think, just kind of clean up and shorten the title of, instead of saying Campo bylaws and operating procedures for the blah, blah, blah. Just take the for the part out and just leave it as Campo bylaws and operating procedures. And then the second item, there are different references throughout the document. For example, there's some that say the transportation study, which I think is literally a carryover to the very early days of Austin Transportation Study. So I'm just going to ask staff to look, and Tim to look through it and identify any incorrect or obsolete references. Getting on down to where we call it public involvement program. I think our common vernacular now is public participation. So I'm just recommending changing that to what we currently refer to it as. And also in section 1B, it refers to the Austin metropolitan area. I recommend we change that to Central Texas. And if there are other places where it says Austin metropolitan area, we change that to Central Texas. Then going on down to section 1D, it says the tip specifies how federal transportation funds are. Our tip also includes state and local. So just insert that clarification there. In section 1E, the UPWP, just adding a bit of clarification to say that it is federally required. UPWP is a federally required document. And then where it says the estimated expenditures, I think if we include the number of years in there, that would just be a clarifying step. I believe it's 2. And then let's see. And then a clarification also in section 2A, just identify that is the policy board is the legal and governing entity of Campo. And then jumping on down to section 3B, the bylaws currently say if you're going to have somebody carry your proxy for the meeting, that you notify the chairperson. That is not what we've been doing in practice. I rarely get the notification. What we commonly do is notify the executive director. So to bring that into practice, I think if we simply say the chairperson and or the executive director there, that way it would, and 2 hours prior to the start of the meeting, that way we can know who's got whose proxies and whatnot. And then I don't know, I can't remember if this made it to my notes here, but the executive committee also discussed removing that next thing on non-voting proxies. I don't know that we've ever used that function. It seems to be a carryover in the bylaws. And so the recommendation was to take that out. And then for purposes of what you have in your backup, I'm going to skip what I've written on 3D, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Then jumping on down to 3E, just a simple clarification in there. I mean, I think it kind of goes without saying, but if for some reason the chair does not include an item on the agenda, that member may petition the executive committee, and by majority vote of the executive committee may require them to put it on the agenda. I think that was kind of assumed there, but that's just a clarification thing. And then when you get to that section also, Campo has already been operating in compliance, I believe, with the new changes last legislative session to the Open Meetings Act, because we've been taking public citizens' comments on non-agenda items as well as input on agenda items. But I've asked, I think we need to bring that particular section in the bylaws up to speed with what we've been practicing. And then we had some discussion on attendance. And currently the bylaws say that if you miss more than half of the board meetings, but there was a recommendation to include also 3 consecutive meetings or more than half. There was also some talk about maybe that should be 40%. But, the goal is to have members of the policy board that are active and that are engaged. On executive committee membership, the recommendation was to change it to chair, first vice chair, second vice chair, policy board members from each county, and also insert City of Austin. That was an omission on my part. Cap Metro and others appointed by the chair, and that no entity would have more than one person on the executive committee. So, for example, in the case right now, if Councilmember Kitchen were not is the officer, there would not also be another Austin person on there. And then Section 5C, that appeared to be redundant, so my recommendation was to delete that. On Section 6, on other committees, just kind of clarify that those are for a specific task and time specific unless otherwise specified. And 6E, that the TAC is a standing committee. And that on that same subsection 6E3, that maybe edit that to say that the TAC would weigh in on the development of the UPWP excluding amendments. That would line up with our practice that we've been doing. And then the last section is, I felt like that this ethics policy should apply to the Transportation Policy Board only, and not necessarily Campo staff. Not that staff shouldn't have ethical principles to follow, but that should be in an employee manual. And as this relates to the policy board, and that the ethics, so any references to staff be deleted from this document, but ensure that they are in the policy manual. Okay, so I'll go back to the section I skipped, but before I do, I know for a lot of you, this is the first time to look at all this. I went through the things that I thought were just mostly clarification and cleanup kind of things. Did anything pop up in terms of thoughts or questions you had on any of those initial things I went over?
Commissioner,
yeah, go ahead and speak up because my view, I can't see everybody at the same time.
Mr. Mayor Morgan.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
I'm sorry, I might have to get off this call, but just because of stuff I went through this last year, I would have a little bit of concern of the 3G going to someone's board and asking them to be removed after, and instead of a shall, maybe a may. I'll think on it a little bit more on how, to do it. But the other question would be, does that count proxies if you send a proxy?
Well, that's a good question. Want to put that out there to the board. What do y'all think? Because, in theory, you could be counted there, but never show up at a meeting. And I'm not sure that's what's intended either. If you had a proxy at every single meeting, you would be counted there by proxy. So, yeah, and I know just what you've gone through, Mayor. So I'd welcome any input that you all have. That was the idea, is just to encourage participation.
So our charter has that same deal. It's 3 consecutive meetings, and then basically the council has to vote to not remove you. I'm okay with the 3 consecutive meetings. I think because I think that works itself out. I don't know about the and or 50%, but I do think there ought to, you can't make a rule for everything. But I would have never been gone for a year. I promise you, if it wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And Chair, I would say that maybe what maybe the thing to do is put language in there that if there's a proxy, then that doesn't count, because each of I mean, we need to account for the situation that Mayor Morgan just laid out. But we also have some entities that operate in a way that their proxies are really part of their membership. So a proxy still gives you the same level of participation. So I'd like to think about a way to allow for that.
Okay, so, yeah, and again, my goal today was that this was a discussion. We're not voting on anything, and we wanted to, the executive committee wanted to bring this to the bigger board to get your input. Any other thoughts? Councilmember Alter, I see your hand. And Mayor Houston, if you could mute your microphone, I think we're getting some feedback from you.
It's not me.
Oh, okay.
So I just wanted to, I want to think a little bit more about how you get on the agenda, because there were 2 different versions that I had understood. So the way that you presented it was that you can only get it on the agenda if a majority of the executive committee disagrees with the chair, if the chair doesn't want to put it on. Is that correct? It's not that you need a majority of the board to put it on the agenda.
Yeah, it was an executive committee. We did that back and forth and started talking about, how you do that without creating an open meetings issue to get an item on the agenda that's not on the agenda. And so it was really just adding a clarification, because the bylaws currently say the executive committee can tell the chair to put it on if the chair hasn't previously agreed to put it on. So that's the way it works currently. We've never had to invoke that. There's, I don't know that there's been an item that's not been put on. But anyway, that was just to add majority to clarify. I think if it had have been invoked, that's probably how it would have been practiced, but.
Okay, I'll just say that I want to think through that, because I had seen, I think, multiple versions of that, and I just want to make sure I have in my head the right one. I do think it would be good for, a subset of the board to be able to suggest that they wanted a briefing on something or something at the very minimum, whether the chair wanted it or not. I would hope that the chair would want it. I just, I think there might be some room for having those. And again, I don't know if there's any need for it. I haven't observed that to be a problem to date, but it is something I wouldn't want to preclude.
Yeah, I was trying not to solve a problem that didn't exist. It was more for clarification. So any other questions?
Appreciate you raising that, because that was kind of just as we get into the other sections, it would be really helpful to understand the problems that we are trying to solve, so that make sure we understand
Right.
what we're doing with the bylaws. So I appreciate if you can provide that clarification as we move forward.
Sure.
Madam Chair, this Commissioner Schiff.
Yes, ma'am.
I would actually like to request, partly because I'm having a lot of difficulty following the different sections that you're referencing, and without a red line, it's really hard to follow exactly what is currently in the policy and all of what is being proposed. Plus, we will have at least 3 new Transportation Policy Board members seated in January, replacing Mayor Ross, Judge Biscoe, and Commissioner Doherty. And I just think, because I've seen this happen before in meetings where when an item comes up for a vote, and there's a desire for more discussion, frequently people will say, look, we discussed it before. We don't really want to have a long discussion. I think we need to wait until the new board is seated before we have a discussion about what could have big impacts on the makeup of the governance of the board. So because there's no red line, and because we don't yet have a board that will be governing once these policies take place, if they are changed and adopted, I just think we need to wait on this discussion.
Commissioner, if you'll notice, this is only for discussion. It's not for action. And it is, there's no other way to have a discussion about this unless we post it and have it at a meeting. And
I'm recommending that we have it at the January meeting, because my point is, when items have been split for discussion one meeting and a vote in a subsequent meeting, people don't really like it when we spend more time discussing over again at the meeting where we're going to vote. I just think we should have the full, complete board that's going to be seated in January as part of the discussion.
All right, thank you for your input. I think Mayor Houston, I saw you trying to raise your hand.
Yeah, I only unmute when I'm trying to speak, and before I can address you, I get muted again. So I'm trying. Here is a suggestion for the attendance issue, and I use this on a nonprofit board, is that if someone violates whatever the absence policy is, they're off, but they can appeal to come back. And I think that we had maybe a 2/3 vote of the sitting members could allow them back, but if they didn't appeal, they were off. And they had to make a pretty good appeal, or as Will Connolly said, grovel. And but we let him back on. But that's a thought, because there are times when there is a reason to let someone back on, because they did have some extenuating circumstances. But I personally like to see a pretty hard attendance policy, because if you're not there, you're not serving. So that's a suggestion.
So thank you for that. And I think you articulated, for those of you who serve on the CAPCOG board also, there's a pretty strict attendance policy there, and it can affect future representation. There's been members who've not been renominated to serve who didn't show up for meetings. And so, like I said, the spirit here is not to be punitive. It's really to encourage participation. So, we welcome suggestions on that.
Yeah, Chair Long, I'd just like to just bear in mind as we work out this one that I'm not sure we've had a problem with this before. So I think we just need to be careful about how we handle this, because I'm not aware of it having been an issue, and lots of entities we're a broad board with different types of entities and different, each of our entities handle representation differently. And so I just don't want us to inadvertently create something that causes some difficulties for some entities. And when there's not a problem here that we're solving for that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it hasn't occurred this year. In years past, there's been issues when individual members used their proxy for more than half the meetings that year. And I'm not talking about Mayor Morgan's issue, just for whatever reasons. So again, the goal is for engaged members to participate. So y'all germinate on that and think about it and see what you might come up with. Any other questions before I move on to my thoughts behind the officer categories and selection?
Chair Long, this is Houston again. I agree with, I forget who said it, that we need to be making these decisions after we have a new board next year with a red line version that we can contemplate. So if there was thoughts that we would be doing this in December, I would suggest that we not, and I would probably make a motion to postpone so that we wait until we have the new board members.
So I appreciate that. I think with the discussion today, we can probably at least clean up a lot of the reference issues and things like that, some just general cleanup sorts of things. And certainly want ample input on the meatier items. So I'll move on to section 3D of the bylaws, which talk about the officers. And as I've visited with MPOs from other parts of the state and gotten Ashby's done, staff has done some research as well, trying to figure out what's the best way that we can include a broad section of board members in leadership. And so some of the and what I did is sort of pulled together the commonalities and the things that seemed to work in the various MPOs. And so what, and again, this is just Cynthia's proposal, but it's basically 3 categories of board entities. So for example, large counties, over 150,000. And then the second category would be large cities over 70,000. And then the third category would be counties smaller than 150 and cities smaller than 70. This would exclude Cap Metro and TxDOT from being in the Cap Metro representative and TxDOT representative from being in the rotation for officer. Tucker wholeheartedly embraced that when we talked about it. But the thought behind that and what that would do is add one more officer. And again, I go back to it takes, for those of you who've been on the policy board for a while, you know, it takes a good while to get up to speed with all the different aspects of what we do at Campo. And so the thought is having one more officer in that rotation so that by the time that person becomes chair, there would be a really good working knowledge of how Campo works, how the federal transportation stuff works, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then I made an attempt to show how things, how people would rotate through that. Again, this is somewhat how they do it in the San Antonio MPO. For those of you who serve on CapCog, you'll see a little CapCog flare there. I was just trying to figure out what might work for our region, but also give, especially the smaller entities, a shot at being in that officer rotation. Any comments on that? Let's see. I see Mayor Adler's hand. I think you're still muted, Mayor. There you go.
Thank you. And Cynthia, I like the idea of having the rotation and giving people additional chance. The kind of ways you broke it down 3 categories makes sense. I need to take a look at the numbers, I think, just to see how that plays out. But giving more people a chance to be in that leadership role, I think is good. You know, it was I think good that I could do it for a year after having been on Campo for several years. And I like the idea of having 3 so that there's that rotation, so that somebody rotates through 2 cycles before their chair. I think we ought to consider making it a 1-year term for everybody. That way in the 3rd year, you'd be chair, which makes sense to me. I think that way the rotation could move more quickly. And I think people would be ready to do that after having served as an officer in the 2 prior years. There are some entities that have term limits, and people are only going to serve 8 years total in the job. And if it's a longer term, it's going to be difficult, if not possible, for some people to be able to rotate through and to be able to have a leadership position. But I like the idea of having the rotation, that the way that you set it up, give different people opportunities to do that, and different perspectives, the opportunity to do that as it kind of rotates through. But anyhow, so that's my comment on that.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Let's see, I'm going to scroll through. Do I see any other?
Mayor Houston is waiting.
Mayor Houston has her hands up. Yeah.
Council Member Matea or Mayor Houston, whoever goes next.
She had her hand up first. I'll let her go first.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, I agree with Mayor Adler about the 1-year term. For me, mayor is only a 2-year term. For that to be a 6-year commitment, and you need to be on Campo for a while before you get there. So I do like the idea of someone coming in knowing that they're going to be chair in a year or two. So the 3 years is fine. I think 6 years is just way too much. And I think what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with vacancies as they rotate through either choice or election. And then it's just not it's going to end up not working.
All right. Thanks. Councilmember Matea.
I love how Mayor Houston said either vacancies because of choice or election. I love it. That was good. No, I agree. I think that
coming from somebody who's on the ballot tomorrow, right?
Yeah. No pressure at all. No, I agree. I think that Madam Chair, I think it's phenomenal for you to have this term. I was thinking to myself, I was like, why are we adding a second vice chair? But hearing more about it, I really like the idea. I like what Mayor Adler said specifically about 1 year too as well. Just have that constant rotation with it. And to break out in the categories, I mean, it's one of the things that we keep talking about here on this board is that we're not necessarily happy regarding the process, procedures, and how things are done and allocating resources. I like seeing something specific that's going to help engender what's going on in other MPOs where, in fact, you're hearing from all different voices and they all feel like they have their inputs and viewpoints, and trying to get more things in a better light, in a systematic way implemented right there as well. So I think this is a really good idea.
Okay.
Chair.
Council Member Kitchen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't see if others have their hands up. Is there someone else that should go first, or?
I'm scrolling quickly through. I don't see anybody else.
I might suggest that staff take down the background document, because then we can see each other better. So I was just going to say that, yeah, I really appreciate and want to say thank you for giving some thought to this, Chair, because there's a lot of possibility here to structure ourselves so that we provide for a rotation of leadership and provide some more opportunities. So I think the basic structure here is a good structure. I would also say that that 1 year terms might be something we should consider. It might be the best way to actually give us a better chance of accomplishing that, because of the 3 year cycle. Like I think Mayor Houston someone had talked about it. That as opposed to a longer cycle. So I would just echo what my colleagues have said, that I think that it's a good basic structure, and then I would suggest that we look at a 1 year term.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on this particular item?
Much easier to see each other now without the presentation on there. So good afternoon, everybody.
All right, so that
Chair Long?
Yes, Councilmember Archer.
Okay.
Did you already include in there the part about stories, or is that what we're doing now? It just wasn't.
I already talked through it. I didn't hear any feedback unless you have some.
I guess again, I appreciate the rotation, and I think that allows not only for the leadership to have the experience, but I think that it will allow us as a body to better understand other people's challenges so that we can focus in regionally effectively. I wasn't sure about the categories and their definition, the population cutoff for the large cities without the numbers and like which ones fall in which buckets to understand that. And then also just right now with, I don't know if it's in the bylaws or de facto, there is some rotation that's happening. And it seems like this scenario, you could have all three of those in a row be from one county if there wasn't some other informal element to it.
So the numbers, my goal was to attempt to make sure there were always at least 3 or more entities in each category. There's, I think just by nature, there's probably going to be more in the third category. But that's also the category, to Mayor Houston's point, where there's probably more turnover in some of the smaller cities just because of the 2-year terms and that sort of thing. And currently in the bylaws, there's suggestion on rotation, but there's not really anything that speaks to the chair can't. I mean, this is a new start, so I think what we would want to do is define, to the point you're making, that you probably don't want the Travis County representative and somebody from Pflugerville and somebody from City of Austin in all 3 of those slots. Is that the point you were making about potentially having 3? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we figure out how to write that, I'll, but I hear your point, because the goal is broader representation. So we would want to limit, I don't think you say, so I'd welcome feedback on it. Is it that we never want anybody from the same county as officers, or no more than 2 of the 3?
Well, I also, I'm concerned also with, over time, how it plays out. And, I don't know which cities fall into which category off the top of my head, or the whole policy board. So I think having some data to play with to think that through, I think would be useful. I don't know what the right answer is. I appreciate the idea of having the rotation and the other. I'm just not sure that I'm comfortable with where we've landed for the specific categories that would be part of this. And I'll just echo what was said before, that is something that I would support as well. So I was just trying to understand, because 70,000 gets a lot of cities into that middle chunk, and a 70,000 person city and a 1 million person city are not necessarily the same. And so I'm not sure what the right answer is there. But I think we need to do some additional thinking about that and have some additional data so we know which cities are in which buckets, and would also depend on whether for a 1-year rotation.
So Ashby, if you could work on identifying and it's going to be based on last year's population estimate. Obviously, things will change next year when we get the decennial census data, but Ashby, if you wouldn't mind putting a population estimate by each one of the member entities and sending that out to the policy board, that would be helpful.
Yes, ma'am, I can do that. And Mayor Houston and I had a similar email discussion earlier today, and I can tell you right now, Councilmember Alter, as far as the counties are concerned, three that would be at or above the threshold would be Travis, Hayes, and Williamson. As far as the cities, and let me find my email I sent to Mayor Houston so I make sure I'm consistent with what I said. Let's see. I know Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown, and I think Cedar Park
Cedar Park.
are over the threshold. The draft threshold has been written. There, the others that are close, they're in the mid to high 60s, would be Pflugerville, San Marcos, and Mayor, do you have the other one handy? I haven't found mine yet.
I think it was Leander.
Leander.
Thank you. It's Leander.
Yeah, so that might not work because that would be all the cities. So we'll just have to think through that and look at, like I said, my goal was to get at least 3 entities in every category, 3 or more. But, you know, we'll just have to figure out from a population perspective what that looks like.
Well, Madam Chair, if you want to make your day, yeah, now we're well over 70,000 here in Pflugerville, so.
Woohoo! Mayor Houston.
I would suggest instead of putting in numbers, if you want to have at least 3 in each category, we're 6 counties, so just say the 3 largest are the large, and then the other 3 go here, and pick whatever the number of cities are, just say the top 4, 6, 7, whatever it is, you know, that we just split it down the middle or whatever. But I would not like to see putting numbers in the bylaws because then we'll just have to keep changing them. But just whatever philosophy that you're using to compute those, just put that strategy in the bylaws instead of the numbers is my suggestion.
Okay, thanks. Any other thoughts on that topic? Okay, hearing none. Let me find my agenda again. Thank y'all for your input. Again, you know, we discussed it at the executive committee, but wanted to get input from the full board on this. So I appreciate that very much. Item number, and again, that was just for discussion, no action on that. Item number 10, executive director's report.
Just a few things very quick, Madam Chair. So I was contacted by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. A couple of weeks ago, their annual conference is coming up. So this organization is the one that is the national organization for all of the state transportation departments. So it's all of the departments like TxDOT. And so I was contacted by them and asked if I would consider working with James Bass, who is the executive director of TxDOT, to do a session at their annual meeting on November 9th, similar to a session I did 4 years ago with the deputy executive director of TxDOT. And what they want us to talk about in this session, and it would just be the 2 of us, would be productive working relationships between metropolitan planning organizations and state departments of transportation. And in particular, they want us to talk about the work that we did together as MPO and TxDOT on I-35. And they also would like to talk to us to talk about the work we've done on Oak Hill Parkway and some other things. So just wanted to mention that that's coming up on November 9th. And if you want to pay the really high fee for the conference, you can pay the $500 or $600 and watch James and I talk for 45 minutes. The other item on this item is a couple of years ago, the Burnett County Commissioners Court asked Campo staff if we would consider helping them with the update to their transportation plan. And we have been doing that. The draft was presented to Commissioners Court last Tuesday, and they are reviewing it and will come back to us with potential changes. And that was all I have, Madam Chair.
What about the TAC membership applications?
Oh, I almost forgot. So it's that time of year again where we need the submittals for TAC members for the 2021 calendar year. And I think, Ms. Petty, if we haven't sent the form already, the forms will be going out. And we'll need to get those back before the end of the year by the deadline.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And let me circle back to item number 3, which was chair announcements. And I wanted to share with you all a discussion I've had actually earlier today with the transportation subcommittee of Aero. And one of the things that has struck me that I think would be extremely helpful on Campo is perhaps an ex officio member, because we have the ability to appoint ex officio members from the business community. And so that's not an elected official, that's not representing any particular entity. So I had a really great discussion with that subcommittee today, and have asked them to sort of chew on that and bring back to us. It sort of feels like a business advisory committee that would be regional in nature, and that committee having a person that would serve as a ex officio member of Campo. And really bring a voice that I think sometimes we're missing in that discussion. So just wanted to give you all an update as to that. And I'm looking forward to hearing back from them on how we might be able to implement that going forward. So I don't have any other comments, just as a reminder that the next TAC meeting is November 16th. And we are scheduled for our next policy board meeting on December 7th. So,
Chair, I had one item. And this is actually for Ashby. Could you give us an update? I know that you had mentioned in a previous meeting that you were working towards a meeting where you could bring back some information for us related to prioritizing our projects and that sort of thing. And so I think that you were working towards December. Is that right? Or can you just speak to that and let us know what you're thinking?
Yes, ma'am. So we are working towards December on that item still. So at last month's meeting, we had some discussion about that item. It was sort of related to the item on transportation alternatives projects, if you recall, council member. And what we were proposing on that particular item was asking the board to award some funding available to 2 deferred projects, bicycle pedestrian projects right now. And then the board could decide what it wanted to do on the remainder, but we're not up against the deadline right now. So what we were looking to do as staff was we're going back to the city of Austin and to Travis County on those 2 specific projects to make sure those projects are ready to go. And then we're going to come back in to the board. But when we come back, we're also going to bring you the rest of the information with the prioritization on it. But it's going to look very similar to what you've seen already.
Okay, and so you're working towards December.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we've reached out to both staffs, and we should definitely be able to meet the timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for your participation. And Ashby, if you and staff can work on summarizing the discussion around the bylaws and clean up my very crude notes to make that a little bit more coherent discussion. I would appreciate that. And thank you all for joining us today. And we will adjourn at 3:19.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just real fast, because the timing of when the bylaws come back, I was uncertain. I agree with Hassman that it really should be considered the substantive ones when we have past the new elections and stuff. Certainly, if there are non-substantive changes to consider in December, that I think would be fine. But the more substantive issues, I think we need to make sure that the people are going to be living with this for the next couple of years participated in the decision making.
There certainly are a few clarification things, like that we already comply with the Open Meetings Act and some other things that I think are important to go ahead and get cleared up. So thanks, Mayor. And again, thank you all, and have a great rest of your Monday.
Woohoo, time back. Thank y'all. Y'all take care.
Good luck to everybody tomorrow on the ballot.
Bye.